I would hate to be a dog entering a shelter. I wouldn't want any part of it. To me, the best way to describe what a dog goes through would be like if you or I got pulled off our couch and arrested for something we didn't do. Cop shows up, throws you in handcuffs, throws you in the back of the car, takes you downtown, puts you in a cell. All of that is going to create this kind of what the? You're going to really get overwhelmed by that whole experience. Now, add to that, when a dog gets in the shelter, their senses are very sensitive. So their nose is going to pick up on everything going on. So the stress, the fears, the domination, the insecurities, the urine, the feces, all of that is going to be presented as a scent. And that's how the dog sees the world. So they'll be overwhelmed by their sense of smell. While at the same time, shelters are incredibly loud. So the sounds are going to be so loud that it would come down on their head, so to speak. It'll feel like a vice. And the combination of their senses being overwhelmed, being pulled out of their home, the routine being thrown off, it actually hits them, sends them into shock. So if you go into a shelter, it's very easy to see a dog that's in a state of shock. They huddle. They kind of have this little turtle shell on their back, and what they try to do is make themselves small so they can hide. Now, a lot of dogs that people think were abused were never actually abused, but what happened is they never got past that shock that they encountered when they went into a shelter. Other dogs can fare better. Other dogs can handle it a little bit easier, but no matter what, almost all dogs that end up in the shelter environment bring baggage from that environment into their new home. You know, when a dog meets a family for the first time, I think they're trying to just figure things out. If you or I went into a family for the first time, it'd be the same thing we were trying to figure out. They just go about it in a different way. Dogs inherently look at the world as either a leader or a follower. And they're going to try to determine this within moments of meeting you. So when you bring them into your family unit, they're trying to understand that dynamic, first of all, because what it does is it sets a psychology. If a dog believes that they're a follower to the pack that they've just been brought into, or the members of the pack they've been brought into, it will set their psychology to listen, follow. And those are the dogs that we talk about as being the greatest dogs. They're so easy. I can't believe how great they are. And then some dogs come in and they take over, or they get a sense that I need to be a leader. And those are the dogs that bring a lot of trouble with them, because a leader is going to make decisions like a leader. They're going to tell you what to do. They're going to tell you what you need. They're going to get pushy. They may get controlling. And so, you know, that's determined very, very, very quickly when a dog meets a new family. Once that's established, what happens is patterns start to be learned. Once they figure out their role, the behaviors start to take shape based on the day-to-day lifestyle of the family. So if the family is really active and social and they have a lot of people coming in and out, the dog has to figure that out. Do I greet these people and invite them in, or do I control all these intruders and make them stay away? And so the dog has to figure out the family's lifestyle. The dog has to figure out, am I a leader or am I a follower? And then the dog has to figure out the rules based on those things. So it's a really tricky thing for a dog, especially since the entire time this is happening, the dog is speaking in dog and the humans are speaking in human, and there's this miscommunication. So to me, it's usually luck if a dog comes in and behaves well, because there's so much happening that it's very easy for a dog to come in and do things that we then don't like and we consider a problem. You know, I am the dogs I help. Most of the dogs I help are confused and misunderstood, and that is really how I feel I've spent the greater part of my life. I kind of look at the world differently. I dance to my own beat, if you will, and so I look at the world from out here, and as a result, I feel like an outsider looking in. I never felt truly accepted, and I see that with dogs. You know, when we bring a dog into our human world, we humanize them, and when you humanize them, you kind of take away some of their identity as a dog, and as a result, they get confused and they feel misunderstood, and you see it all the time. It's a very easy thing to see. And I'm able to come in and clear that up. I'm able to come in and bring a clarity to the relationship so that the relationship can be stronger. It can actually be based more in an understanding than this superficiality that often is what the relationship is based on. I mean, how can you have a relationship if you're speaking different languages? And that's really what it comes down to, is I've been able to recognize how confused dogs are, how misunderstood they are, and I can relate every moment of that process. And then I get to help them. That's the cool thing, is I get to take them out of that misunderstood spot and bring them into an understood spot. I teach my clients dog, and I mean, that's the greatest gift I can give the dogs, is teaching their humans how to speak their language. You know, when I first started doing this, I made all the same mistakes that I see all my clients make, and that you make, that everybody makes. Because keep in mind, I wasn't born into this. This is something that I learned much later on in life, and so I've done it both ways. I've made all the mistakes that everybody makes, and now I've learned what needs to be done. So when I first started doing this professionally, you know, my personality characteristic of being a very amped up person is what got in my way. And so no matter what I was doing, the tendency for me was that I did things too quick and that I wanted too much and I lacked just a little bit of patience. And so what happens if you do something too quick, that energy that comes off of you can easily overwhelm a dog. And if you overwhelm a dog, usually what they'll do is they'll put on the brakes and they'll lack a little bit of trust in what you're doing. And so a lot of dogs that I worked with didn't give me all that I could get because my agenda was off. I was moving too quick. And that was my greatest mistake. Now, coincidentally, that is really the same mistake that I see most people make. It doesn't matter what it is that they're trying to accomplish. They underestimate the amount of time it takes to teach another dog, to teach a dog a new behavior, and they overestimate what the dog is capable of. So as a result, they move too quick, they expect too much. And that's what everybody does. The more you can kind of bring your expectations and your understanding of your dog down to this balanced level in a way that the dog sees that you get, the quicker that dog connects and tunes into you. And the mistakes almost always come out of that trying too hard, too fast, too quick. When a dog leaves the shelter, there's going to be a lot of issues it's going to go through when adapting to a new family. But there's a couple of things that I see more frequently than others, and there's a couple of things that I think have more long-term implications on behavior that I'd like to talk about. The first thing, and this is the biggest issue with everybody, I've talked about it earlier, is I don't think humans give the dogs enough time to adjust and adapt to the new family. Humans like to rush the process. They like to come in and be really excited during the greetings, and they overwhelm the dog very early in the relationship. So the dog gets the wrong sense oftentimes of who his new family really is. You know, there's so much excitement in the greeting of a new dog that we're bringing into the family that the dog gets lost in that. And they're trying to figure out who you are, but they're getting all these smoke screens from the way that you act. I think that really is one of the biggest issues a dog goes through, because where they're trying to learn who you are, you're not being who you are. And that throws them off. Now, the other thing that happens, and this is a really common issue, and this really has long-term consequences to the behavioral health of dogs, is that the worse the story of the dog that we adopted, the more we hang on to it. And the more we like to repeat the story. So if your dog had a terrible past, if your dog was abused, beaten, left on the road to die, we're going to repeat that story as often as we can, because we like to let others know that, my gosh, look what we were able to do. I saved that dog's life. And we feel good about it, but what we don't realize is there is a powerful consequence to holding on to the past. With dogs, their behaviors from the past are just that, the past. With humans, we love to think about and linger in the past and anticipate and get nervous about the future instead of living in the moment. Right here, this little 2 or 3 second frame that's in front of us. And so what happens is we constantly go back to the past and we relive it for the dog. I mean, when you meet a new person or you meet somebody and they're coming in to meet your dog, a lot of people go, hey, this is Buddy right here. Buddy, I'm his third home. He was found in a ditch. He got hit by a car and was left to die. Can you believe it? He was covered in ants, and when they finally got him, they had to amputate his leg. And then everybody goes, oh my gosh, and they feel sorry for him. And what the dog does is he starts to get a sense of humans in this weird, funny energy. As I do this right now, you can hear my dog. He's right here. You see this? As my energy plummels and does these weird, excited things, it actually affects my dogs. You can see it. And so this happens every single time the dog is introduced to somebody. And what it does is it forces the dog, so to speak, to live in the past. So their past becomes the present reality. And that's devastating to them. It would be like if every time I introduced my wife at a party, I talked about all her issues from childhood. Oh, this is my wife, Jennifer. Her mom died when she was 4. She had a terrible eating disorder when she was 13. There was a bad assault on her when she was 21. She was in a terrible car accident at 30. She doesn't like being looked straight in the eye. She may pee on herself. Just ignore her. You know, I mean, that's not going to go very far. What's going to happen is it's going to make her look at people weird, and it's going to make people look at her weird, and a pattern or a cycle gets developed really quickly. And those two things are what I see happen all the time. I'm constantly telling my clients that had a dog that had a terrible past to go buy a big plate of cheese, let's get a bottle of wine and have a pity party for what happened, and let's leave the past in the past, and let's start a new life and move forward with our dog with a great positive energy, using the past to help us stay motivated. You know, first-time adopters make a lot of mistakes, but I see 2 or 3 mistakes that I think are made on a consistent basis that if certain things were understood, the level of improvement overall in the behavior of dogs would go up dramatically. The first, number one, biggest mistake I see made all the time is picking the wrong dog. You have an opportunity when you go adopt a dog to pick the perfect fit. It's like those dating websites. They ask you a whole slew of questions because what they're trying to figure out is who fits you. You know, I've got this whole database of people over here, and they've got all these different personality types and interests and hobbies. You know, and I know I have one that can fit you, so you give me a little bit of information and we can fit you together. Well, that fit means the initial phase of the relationship should be a little bit smoother than if 2 random people met at the grocery store, let's say. And that's ultimately what you can do when you pick a dog out of a shelter. Is you have an opportunity to kind of go down a laundry list of things that you want to look for in a dog. You know, I've got 2 kids. All right, well, let's start looking at dogs that tend to be a little bit better with kids. I've got a small backyard, or I have a big backyard. I have a fence. I don't have a fence. I work 10 hours a day. I work from home. I've got a large social family that comes in and out of my house all the time. I live alone in a small farm off away from everybody. All of these lifestyle factors are going to play a role into which dog is going to fit you, your lifestyle, who you are, your family the best. And if that process is taken advantage of, you can almost eliminate the majority of the problems that I see, because the majority of the problems that I see are bad fits. And that is the number one mistake. Now, the second mistake, once the dog has been picked out and adopted, is that the breeding process has a way that it can either make or break the relationship. And most people underestimate the power of this. For example, one of the things that I try to get all my clients to do that have just gone out and adopted a dog is the very first thing straight out of the shelter is to take the dog for a really long walk. And if you have your family with you, everybody take the dog for a really long walk. If you have a second dog in your family, you, your family, that dog, and the new dog all go for a long walk. Dogs are creatures that journey. They're always moving forward. And what happens if you take a dog out of a shelter and take them on a long walk, they're going to sense that you understand their world from a very primal standpoint. You're going to help them burn the energy from being in the shelter. You're going to help guide and lead them early on. And you're going to demonstrate that you get their world. And that right there is going to have a powerful long-term trickle-down effect on other things that happen in the relationship with your dog. So picking the right dog, number one. The breeding process, number two. You know, there's a lot of different emotions that come from bonding with a pet. And there's a happiness and joy that comes from bonding with an animal that is like as different than bonding with humans. There's a purity that dogs have that you don't get from people. You know, we like to put on airs and make you think one thing or another. Where dogs, they're not a part of that. And so one of the things that I've experienced in my career that creates a level of joy that to me is the big reason I do this is that I'm able to help animals recover from really bad places. So a lot of these dogs we talked about that went into shock when they went in shelters, I can help remove that shock. I can help take a dog out of shock and put them in a nice, happy, balanced, relaxed, wiggly spot. You can see it behind me, all these dogs that were kind of playing and having fun. These were all dogs with issues. And so I get a certain amount of joy out of bringing peace. Once I've been able to bring peace, the next amount of joy or the next greatest amount of joy I get is from doing really fun things with my dogs. I like to be active. And so, you know, it's like having a buddy with you. If you go fishing, it's always better if you fish with a buddy. If you go golfing, it's better if you golf with a buddy. And I like to take my dogs and do those things. I lived on a golf course for a while, and I could take my dog out, play a few holes, and there's a lot of behavioral benefits to that. I ride bikes, I rollerblade, I skateboard, I surf. These are all things I've actually integrated my dogs with me to do because that bond creates a joy that's different than just sitting on the couch petting your dog. It's when your dog looks to you and learns from you. It's like my little girl. When you help them grow and develop and move forward, and there's this excitement that they have, they bring that back to you. And that joy right there is the joy that only comes from bonding with an animal. You know, the human-animal relationship has many elements to it, and there's a great deal of possibilities. There's so many different avenues that this can take. The common avenues that most people know about are obviously how dogs can help us. You know, they provide a service role. They can be used to help to support people with anxiety. You know, seeing eye dogs, police dogs. You know, those ways are obvious. But one of the things I see in the way that dogs have helped me, anyways, the most is that dogs have an ability to always keep you aware of who you are. Really, who you are. Not who you're trying to be, but who you are. And these are things that your dog has an ability to expose in us. I've been doing this long enough, and I'm so open to the connections I see that I've even started seeing connections between certain medical conditions and certain behaviors in dogs. And I see it really consistently. It's kind of creepy almost. And so I think ultimately one of the greatest gifts dogs have for us is teaching us through how we balance them, how to balance us. That is the greatest gift. I mean, I've got to exercise. I've got to meditate. I've got to do yoga. I've got to bring a peace to my crazy mind so that I have an ability to walk into a situation that's out of control and use my energy to soothe it out. Now, once you learn how to do that, you start to have an ability to take this to every avenue of your life. You know, as a father, dogs have taught me how to be a much better dad. I overparented my first dog, and as a result, I created an aggressive nightmare. Well, I'm glad I didn't do that with my girl. I'm glad I got an opportunity to learn about who I was through my dogs. My dogs have taught me how to mellow out and how to slow down and not put too much importance on certain things and keep it simple. There's times when my little girl will be very scared or she'll have fallen and hurt herself. And instead of trying to vocally soothe her, just like a lot of people do that nervous dog, I will pick her up, I will hold her to me, and I'll take 5 or 6 really deep breaths, and I'll concentrate on bringing my emotional energy to a very peaceful spot. And what happens is when I get to that spot, I'll feel her. She almost breathes with me, and I bring her energy down to mine. That is the exact thing that's happening day in and day out with the dogs that I'm trying to help, the people I'm trying to help, the dogs in the shelter, all of it. They're responding to energy around them. And when we learn how to read that energy and understand how our energy is affecting those around us, you talk about what you can create and how you can move forward in life. There is no greater gift than being told every day by these dogs right here how I'm behaving. None. And that's the part of the human-animal relationship that's only been scratched, but we need to get into that. You know, everybody can benefit from adopting a pet. There's not any one person that benefits more or less. Everybody can take something out of bringing a pet into their life because there's a lot that comes from that. There's an unconditional love, there's bonding, there's feeling wanted, there's feeling liked, and those are all great emotions. And the other thing it can do too is for a lot of people it can get them out of their shells. It takes them outside. You know, you got to walk your dog, you got to take them out to use the bathroom. And a lot of people were kind of socially isolated before that. People that get embarrassed easy, anything like that. Dogs draw attention to you. And so dogs can benefit everyone. You just have to give them the little bit that they need so that when you need to take from them, it's there, it's available. But everybody should get out and have an animal in their life and learn what that animal needs and fulfill it. Fulfill themselves in the process. You know, if I was going to give you some advice on adopting the right dog for your family, I'd have to ask you a couple questions, and I see that you have a couple of kids. So the questions I would ask first are, how old are the kids? I'd want to know if you've had a dog in the past. I'd want to know your experience level with being able to handle, you know, different levels of dogs and so forth. Now, the reason the age of your kids is important is because I know being a parent takes a lot of time, and it's a full-time job, if you will. And if you bring in a puppy, as great as it may sound, it may seem wonderful on paper to have a puppy and a child together. Puppies are an amazing amount of work. It's like having another child in some instances because of the structure and how much you have to watch them and what they need. Otherwise, they get out of control. that would be my first question. Now, obviously, you live in a rural area, so you probably have some space. So it sounds like you would have a large yard or a large area for the dogs, which is really good. I would then ask you, what's your schedule like? Are you a stay-at-home mom? Do you work at home? Do you work in an office? Are you gone 10 hours a day? I would need to know what you could bring to the table in regards to the needs of the dog that you want. So I'm ultimately going to try to figure out what your family's lifestyle is about. You know, who are you a little bit as a person, so that I can best find the dog that's going to allow you the most enjoyment with the least amount of output, so to speak. There's a pattern to what we, the human, do at the front door, and what we do tells the dog what to do. But what we don't realize is that we're miscommunicating once again what it is that we want. 9 times out of 10, the pattern at the front door is something like this. The doorbell rings, or the knock, 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 and the dog barks. Well, that's a good thing. We want our dogs to bark and tell somebody outside, hey, there's a dog in here. Great. But when the human approaches, it needs to stop. But the reason it doesn't is this. When most people go to the door to get control of their dog, they go in with some type of emotional energy that's either nervous, embarrassed, frantic, scared, upset, angry. There's a bunch of different emotions that we go through. But the emotion that we're not, the emotion that dogs follow, is calm and patient. We're not that. And so what the dog does is they get a sense that the knock on the door or the doorbell ring and the person on the other side of the door is causing your emotions to be like that. Nobody makes that connection. So when you go over, stop, quit it, stop, quit it. The dog thinks, look how my dogs get up. The dogs think that it's the door that's causing it. So what happens is that they're like, no, I get it, you need help, I get it. So they amp up. Look, as I make these excited, animated type of movements, look what it does to my dogs. The energy is literally coming off of me into them. So this is happening at the front door. And what happens then is this goes back and forth 2 or 3 times. And the dog is finally like, I know, get out of the way. And the human finally says, forget it. And they open up the door. Well, that now becomes a learned behavior or a pattern that will repeat itself every single time somebody knocks at the front door. If you want to fix it, what you have to do is you have to change what you're saying. And the best way to do this is to remember that in practice, you have to act as... In practice, you have to act as if you have all day. And what you'd want to do to fix it is you'd want to attach a leash to your dog. You'd want to have somebody go outside, knock on the door, and let your dog go to the door and bark. When you approach the door, I want you to grab the leash, turn around, and walk your dog away from the door about 10 or 15 feet. Tie that leash to something heavy like a couch, and then go answer the door. Repeat this about 10 times. And what you're going to find is somewhere between the 3rd and the 10th repetition, the dog is going to start to walk themselves over to the area that you took them. The reason it can be so easy to fix this behavior is because it was so easy to mess it up. You're now communicating clearly, whereas before you were communicating clearly, but you were asking for the wrong thing. Dogs need us to be clear. And using a leash and practice and repetition, taking them away from the door is saying, I don't need your help. I've got control. I'm in control of the door. I'm in control of the person, and I'm in control of you. Chill out. Thank you very much, Sweet Pea. It is never a good idea to tie your dog up outside for long periods of time. If somebody called me up and said they didn't have enough time to exercise their dog and they felt bad that the dog was inside all day, I would tell them, hey, there may be somebody out there that may be able to take your dog and give them a better home. Tying your dog up can have some really serious implications down the road. For example, if your dog is tied up outside and they can see something but they can't get to it, let's say a cat or a squirrel or other people walking by or other dogs walking by, and every time that animal or that object comes into view, they get all worked up and frustrated but they can't get to it, at some point they're going to be able to get to that. And when they can, dead cat, dead squirrel. So the problem is that it can create a lot of behavioral issues, and it's usually dogs that are tied up usually don't have owners that are providing for them what they need. As I sit here doing this, I have about 3 or 4 emails on my computer. Each of those emails have multiple dogs listed from different shelters just in my little local area, to the tune of about 20 dogs. One of them even has a litter of their 8 or 9 week old lab puppies. So there's even puppies that you can get from the rescues in the shelters. Now the difference between all these dogs I'm mentioning and the dogs that are come from a breeder is all these dogs I'm talking about are going to be put to sleep in a couple of weeks if they don't find a home. And the dogs that are going to be coming from a breeder's house, that's not the case. Somebody's going to come along and buy that dog. The dog's going to get a home. So ultimately you're saving a life. Now that comes with its own set of rewards. So you know, you still get the same great love from a dog. And I will tell you from my experience over the last several years that dogs that are saved, they have a sense about them once you bring balance to them that it's almost like appreciation. That's all I can say, is that you don't get appreciation from buying a dog, you do get appreciation from saving a dog. So, reason enough for me.